Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. Goldbelly ships Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garden's famous cakes. So, if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT. That's goldbelly.com, promo code GIFT.
Meet Christine. She loves shopping. And this is the sound of fashion overload. Too many fabulous things, not enough space. So Christine started selling with The RealReal.
I've always loved collecting designer pieces. Gucci bags, Prada heels. But my style keeps evolving. Selling with The RealReal? Game changer. I earn more, and they do everything.
Seriously, just drop off your items or schedule a pickup. We handle the photos, descriptions, pricing, even shipping. You just sit back and watch your items sell fast to our 38 million members.
And I get peace of mind knowing I earn more selling with The RealReal than anywhere else.
Exactly. That's the sound of your closet working for you. The RealReal. Earn more, save time, sell fast. And right now, you can get an extra $100 site credit when you sell for the first time. Go to therealreal.com to get your extra $100. Therealreal.com. That's therealreal.com.
Okay. Well, it's very nice to meet you. And I was looking at your profile earlier, and my very first question is kind of a silly one because my clinical licensure comes from social work, and I have a familiarity with psychology, obviously. But what the hell is organizational psychology?
Okay. Well, thanks for listening. It's good to be here on your show. Well, organizational psychology is really psychology, but embedded in organizations. So it's kind of a cross between social psychology and organizational development. But it's really how do people in the workplace think, feel, and act, and why?
I had no idea that was a field. That's cool. Okay. I like that.
Yeah, it's a field, but I have to say, I often find that the best studies are coming out of clinical psychology or developmental psychology, social psychology, cognitive psychology. So it kind of you pull from all of those different domains of psychology when you're an organizational psychologist.
Well, I mean, I would hope so because everything has a root, even though my 23-year-old says I over pathologize things. Okay, so we're not going to focus on organizational stuff, obviously, but I was wondering, so you, let me find the name of your book. I don't want to missay it. You wrote a book, Love and Suffering, Break the Emotional Chains That Prevent You from Experiencing Love. So, what we could start in this wherever, but like what led you to write that book? What were you seeing that like maybe you met a need in the community through your work or something? What were you seeing that made you even want to go down that path?
Well, there's a few things going on there. One is I really believe that we teach what we most need to learn. I think, it's not research, it's me search. So
Yes.
I think I wanted to better understand love. I wanted to better understand relationships. That's where it starts, I think. And that roots back to probably a lot of loneliness that I felt early in my life. I mean, I'm now one of the with Sarah Wright in New Zealand. She and I are the top two researchers on loneliness in organizations right now. And I think it's not a coincidence. It's that I think I felt a real, sense of not belonging growing up,
Yeah.
disconnection with a lot of my family background, a lot of things that had happened, which we could get into later. And I think that's part of it. I think another part of it is that my previous book was screened in The Art of Living Free in the Digital Age. And I spent 10 years researching how our phones and screens are affecting us and our relationships. And that book, there's a lot of negativity there about how, looking at increases in loneliness, depression, anxiety, mental health issues. I mean, we're really in a crisis right now.
Yeah.
For the first time in U.S. history, the norm in universities is for a student to see a counselor, a mental health counselor. It's not the exception; it's the norm now. It's over 50%. It's never been like that. It used to be the very slight exception, and now it's just we're in a new territory. And so I included a lot of that in Screened In, and then I just started thinking a lot and talking with people and hearing their feedback about Screened In. And the questions were really like, well, how do we form positive relationships, meaningful relationships? And I realized that all this research on loneliness, what I was really getting at is the other side of loneliness, which is connection.
Yes.
And what do we do where we feel connected with others, where we can develop what I call CMSRs, compassionate, meaningful, sustainable relationships? I think that's what all of us are looking for.
Yeah.
And that became the basis of writing Love and Suffering.
I love
I mean,
that. That's so great, especially because I do think in this very age, people are very much seeking community, myself included. And so I really resonate with that. So you said you experienced a lot of loneliness. So did you feel kind of like an other in your family of origin? Like, were you the
I did.
outsider?
I did. It's interesting because I think that, and I don't know if I've really shared this before publicly, but I think that, my mother and I have a very close relationship. I'm feel blessed. She's a wonderful human being, and I wouldn't be here without her. And I have to say that I think she experienced so much sexism and oppression at the hands of men
Mm-hmm.
in her life, even within her family growing up, that she always wanted me to be strong and to be able to stand up to the men that she often felt she couldn't,
Oh, wow.
even as a kid.
Yeah.
And so I became that opinionated, uh, uh, kind of, kind of unfiltered, you know, 10, 11, 12-year-old boy. And my parents were divorced when I was 5. And was really the second stepfather who, well, we didn't cross each other at a very good time for either of us, because he was a journalist in Washington, D.C. He got fired. He felt like society kind of chewed him up and spit him out, and he'd be around the house all day. And I was a threat to him because
Yeah.
I spoke up. And so the only way he could form a sense of power and agency in his life was to physically assault me.
Mm,
So, growing up where, a man comes into your home who's not your father, beats you up and sleeps with your mother, you don't feel like much of a person. And that's how I
yeah.
grew up. So I had very low self-esteem, and as a result, I got picked on a lot at school because, that's what happens when you have low self-esteem, as you know. And so I didn't really feel like I belonged anywhere. At school, I was kind of patently rejected. And then at home, it didn't feel safe to me,
Right. For good reason.
or for very clear, palpable reasons. So I ended up running away, sleeping in parks, anything I can do to get away from there. And it's interesting because this is Cleveland Park, Washington, D.C., a relative, middle class area in Washington, predominantly white. There were like 3 African American families in the neighborhood, all of them like people who with tremendous accomplishments. Like one of them was Wallace Terry, who was the first African American journalist at Time magazine, and he covered the Vietnam War, or what was called in Vietnam the American War. And he covered the African American experience in Vietnam. Wrote a book about it called Bloods, which to this day is an amazing book. And and he had two sons, and his wife and his two, so that became my second family. So that's where I would go,
Wow.
and they treated me like with decency, like a human being, and so that led to a lot of things for me because I ended up marrying a Mexican woman, and we have two kids, and I think I always felt like more accepted by people of other cultures than I did by my own. In fact, senior year of high school, we would, in my high school, we did like a yearbook page where you would try to find other kids who are your friends, and you did a page together. So everybody had
How
half a page, but
fun.
if you had like two people, you could get a whole page, or four people, you got two pages. So I had these other guys, and we, like five of us, were gonna do our yearbook page together. And the guy who I thought was my best friend told me, "Hey, the other guys were talking, and they're saying, do we really want to do a yearbook page with with Anthony Solar? Like, do we want to do we want to be remembered as being his friend?" And
Oh,
yeah, so I kind of maybe for the first time in my life, I really retreated into myself and withdrew, and I stopped calling these guys. I kind of became a loner, and DC is a wonderful international city. I mean, it's 75% parklands. It's very green, and it's got a really cosmopolitan, interesting population. And I ended up meeting this Dutch kid who turned out to be the son of the Dutch ambassador, and he kind of took me under his wing, and I started going with him to these international parties, and all these international kids, from whether they're from Iran or Ghana or Argentina, they were interested in me. Like, okay, wow, we have actually have an American here in our group,
yeah.
and they're asking me questions and want to hear about what I think about this and that. And so that, I think this is where it sort of became the basis for me sort of feeling in my element, being out of my element.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because one of, if you look at like the model of love and suffering, it's called the love progression model. You have these four plateaus that move us toward love, and each one, I have research of psychological studies, but an easy to understand language, and then stories of people going through this progression. So it's acceptance, forgiveness, gratitude, and love. For each plateau, there's an obstacle that has to be overcome. So to reach a state of acceptance, we overcome suffering. To reach forgiveness, we overcome resentment. To
Mm.
reach a state of gratitude, we overcome judgment. And then to reach a state of love, we overcome what I call incarceration. And and these are stages I had to go through myself.
Yeah.
And I think to me, this was kind of a way of responding to the skyrocketing loneliness we're experiencing in our society, because I guess I'm one of those people where I refuse to accept that it has to be this way. We don't need to be this lonely. There are these invisible social barriers that keep us apart from others, and we need to just go through them and
Yes.
discover other people.
Yes, and something that I've really, really had to look at for myself in why I struggle to build community really is my negativity bias, because I was going into social situations with my inner world carrying some pretty shit narratives and
Mm,
kind of doing what we do as humans, which is manipulating the situation to make sure that my outer world becomes my inner world. And so I used to, prior to this little, whatever you want to call it, healing or whatever journey I went on, I really believed that I showed up for everyone better than they showed up for me, and that it was because I
mm,
cared more about other people than they cared about me, or loved them more than they loved me. Really had a, pretty good victim mentality going on there. But the barriers that I have put between me and everyone I've ever encountered were so stark. And yet what I was telling myself was completely different than what was the reality of the situation.
Mm.
And so I've worked really hard to get people to see the barriers that they are placing between themselves and others. How does this model kind of address some of that?
Well, I got to tell you, Melissa, I've been in a similar place in my life where I would focus just like you on why others are rejecting me, and I wouldn't realize that, and that's kind of the basis of the model of love and suffering. I would look at what others were doing to me, but not looking at what I was doing to others.
Mhm.
So, for example, one of the exercises in love and suffering around forgiveness is I ask the reader I say to write down a table with 3 columns. Okay, so for your listeners, imagine that you're whether if you're driving, don't stop and write this down, but just imagine 3 columns. Okay, so think of who is the person in your life that you have had difficulty forgiving. Who's that person where you just not able to forgive them? And I gotta say, so I'm a professor of leadership and organizational psychology, and I have coached Fortune 500 CEOs, senior leaders, companies like Google, Toyota, Disney, also not the leaders of most of the world's largest nonprofits like Save the Children, World Wildlife Fund, political leaders, mayors, G20 cabinet ministers. And no matter how successful these people are, when they come to me, it's because they're stuck in some area of their life, often in their career, but also other areas. And what I've found is that with no variance whatsoever, whenever someone's stuck, it's because there's someone in their life they've never been able to forgive.
Mm.
So forgiveness has massive payoffs. I mean, there's studies from Northern Ireland that people, even when one of their family members is murdered, those who are able to forgive end up experiencing much higher well-being, much less depression and anxiety. You know, the list goes on. Forgiveness is something that's necessary for personal development. When
Yeah.
you think about the opposite of forgiveness, the opposite of forgiveness is resentment. Resentment comes from which is again, and sentire, which is to feel. It's to feel anger again and again and again and again until you become paralyzed.
Yeah.
And this is what most of us do. This is probably what you did, Melissa. It's definitely what I did. Is I resented my stepfather who was physically abusive, and as a result, all the way up into my early 30s, I'm 58 now. Up into my early 30s, I wasn't going anywhere in my career. I was stuck because I felt like the world owed me and other people owed me. And of course, that doesn't get you very far.
Yeah.
And what 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 I do with this exercise, again, you have these 3 columns. I say, imagine that person you have trouble forgiving. And now write down in the first column, what actions did they take or what behaviors of theirs are difficult for you to forgive? And so you make a list of those behaviors. So for me, for example, my stepfather, well, he beat me up, right? He threw me down against a radiator and I couldn't walk right for a week, right? So I'll write down this list. And I ask your listeners to do the same thing, to write down a list of some of the behaviors that you have trouble forgiving from this person. In the second column, write down which character quality is associated with each of those behaviors or actions. So, for example, for my stepfather, okay, he threw me down against a radiator, almost broke my back. What character quality is associated with that? Well, I would say insecurity, I would say insensitivity, and so forth, right? Then in the third column, and this is what stops people in their tracks. In the third column, again, the first column, what actions did they take that were difficult for you to forgive or are difficult for you to forgive? Second column, what character quality would you associate with each of those actions? Now in the third column, which people in your life at any point in your life would associate that same character quality with you? And this is what becomes really, really eye-opening. So
Yes.
I went to Patagonia in Argentina by myself. I spent 2 weeks hiking there in the forests, and I realized I had to forgive my ex-stepfather because I knew I was stuck. I knew I was
Mm-hmm.
paralyzed. And I started thinking, okay, so insensitive. When have I been insensitive? And Melissa, it was embarrassing. The list was
Yes.
not even. It wasn't
Yes.
even a short list. It wasn't even a short
Yeah,
list.
you were probably one of the most insensitive people you could encounter, if I were to guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I thought, for example, about the time I had this guy, David, when after my parents got divorced, it was a couple years later. We're at summer camp together. He said something to me I didn't want to hear, and he was a good friend. And it wasn't even mean what he said, and I just hauled off and gave him a bloody nose, like for no reason. I think about other times when I was in a relationship and I could have treated that person better.
Yep.
And doing this exercise, what helps you to realize is that forgiveness begins with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to forgive someone else, we first have to say, okay, what have I done that may not be forgivable either, if we're going to go into the land of what's unforgivable.
Right.
And then, okay, so what how can I forgive myself? Well, one way we can forgive ourselves is we can say, okay, I was doing the best I could at the time with the emotional, psychological, social resources I had.
Right.
And then from there, we can make the easy transition to go, well, maybe the person I'm having trouble forgiving was doing the best they could with the emotional, psychological, and social resources they had at that time in their life.
Yeah. Yeah. It starts with being able to give yourself compassion and love in the scary places, and also say, I do that too. But I think part of why I had such a hard time not nailing others to this cross of perfectionism is because I was nailing myself to that cross too. And not because I was perfect, but I thought accountability meant beating the shit out of yourself and shaming yourself to death every single time there was any sort of mistake. And so then that's how I treated myself, and then that's how I treated others. But whenever I started to go, how do I do that too? Then it was so much easier because I
Mm.
had gotten to a place where I could pretty easily forgive myself and extend that compassion to myself. And then it was a natural instinct to be able to extend it to them once I understood and made the correlation of how I do that, because now I know how they can do that because I do it too. So I love, though, that you have broken it down into like characterization, because sometimes it can be hard for us to forgive something that we feel we would never do. So yeah, we maybe I would never beat a child, but I can be very aggressive, or you know what I mean? Like there's so many different
Mhm.
ways that you can apply that. So I love your model. I love that so much.
I mean, Melissa, we're all just seeking love or expressing love every moment of every day. And all those times we're beating ourselves up or we're angry at others or aggressive, it's because we're seeking love that we don't feel we're receiving.
Yeah.
And and when you talk about accountability, I think we need to layer into accountability for ourselves and others that the ideal is always, always above the real. So we each have our values and our vision for our lives, how we want to live, how we want to treat others, and we come up short every single day. And that's one of the hardest things about life is, and I think one of the most important abilities in life is being able to acknowledge, okay, the ideal is going to be above the real. Where is the real today? And how can I move from where I am today? How can I start tomorrow and move closer to the ideal, knowing I'll never fully achieve it?
Right.
And that's kind of a complex concept for a lot of people to grasp, but it's a critical one
Mhm.
because if we don't do that, we end up beating ourselves up. It's that negativity bias you mentioned.
Yep.
And the problem with that is that, and I can speak for myself from back when I was very embedded in that negativity bias, it it comes from an inner narcissism. It comes from a sense of why aren't I being treated better than I am? Why aren't I receiving what I want to receive from others? and something is wrong with others if they're not giving it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that is, and this is a classic problem for narcissists, is that we have no power over it. We have 0% power over what we receive from others. Like, hey, I'd love to be treated wonderfully, and everyone would tell me, Anthony, you're great, and I love what you're doing, and I'm going to buy your books and give them to all my friends. I can't control any of that. All I can control, what the only control that we have in our lives, the only power we have in our lives, we have two sources of power. It's giving to others and changing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We have 0% power over what we receive, 100% power over what we give to others and to ourselves. Because if you can decide, okay, how am I going to give to another person, when, with, like, in which way, and how much of it, like, we control that about what we give. And that's the thing. I think that loneliness has a narcissistic subdimension of it, which is, it's all, people often feel lonely. It's often like, why aren't others treating me better? But how many people are asking, why aren't I treating others better?
Yes.
Because let me tell you something. Over 60% of American adults are lonely right now, based on the UCLA loneliness scale. In the extreme levels of loneliness, that's over 3 in 5. And this is a global phenomenon. In the UK, former Prime Minister Theresa May hired a minister for loneliness. And this was based on a study. She did this after a study came out, found that over 8 million British people were lonely. And get this, I'm not making this up. British children spend less time outside than prison inmates, right?
Wow.
So loneliness is peaking.
Wow.
And the more we're on our phones, the more we're on our screens, there's so many studies, I wouldn't even know where to start here, that have found that the more time we're on our screens, the lonelier we become. The lonelier, the more depressed, the more anxious we become, because we're not connecting with each other. This is what I write about in Screened In, is that we go online seeking social connection, but what we end up with is social information. And social information, rather than increasing our happiness, it actually destroys it, because
Yeah.
we go and we get all this social information, which is not real. We go see the one moment in our friend's vacation with their family where everybody was smiling.
Yeah.
We see pictures of guys of our male friends, and they, they take the photos right after they've worked out, so they look buffer. We look at pictures of women using shrinking software to look thinner, and everything is like so meticulously curated. It's this massive game of self-presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And a German study found the number one reported emotion of Facebook users is envy.
Oh, I'm not the least
Because
bit
again,
surprised.
it's like we're going and we're seeing this artificial world everyone's inflating the way they present themselves to others. And so we go, why aren't I as beautiful or good looking or wealthy or whatever it is? And then we become depressed. So I think that's part of where and that's actually when we think about that negativity bias you mentioned, that negativity bias is now integrated into the very fabric of how we communicate with each other.
Yeah.
So if you look at social media, every time a politician uploads a post that's negative and attacking others, the outgroup, those posts are liked and forwarded at 2.7 times the rate of neutral posts or positive posts. That's like
Wow.
a University of Cambridge study. If we look at email and texting, there's what's called a negative affective bias. Chris Byron at Georgia State found this, where when you send an electronic message intending it to be emotionally positive, it's almost always received as being emotionally neutral. If you send it as being with the intention to be emotionally neutral, it's usually received as being emotionally negative. So there's this downward negativity bias, negative slant
Yeah.
on our relationships through the way we're communicating now. And this doesn't happen in person. It doesn't happen on the phone. It happens
Right.
through electronic communication.
Oh, God, that is such a phenomenal point. Wow. Yeah, because now listen, I'm a Gemini, so it's not hard for me to sit and try to make a text really fluffy and, hey, and type the way I talk, but it took a very long time to not read into every little thing. And then to the about the negative posting thing, I've seen this trend on TikTok. People are rage baiting for engagement. They say things they know are going to piss people off just to get the engagement, because that will get them the money that they want, because they get qualified. It has to be a qualified view, so many comments, whatever. And that's the way they've learned to do it, to where like it's actually trained me to have the restraint to not engage, because I'm like, I'm not giving them my money for, not that I was really like super into engaging with rage bait, but like, boy, you get me triggered enough, I'm going to say something back. And so I've had to learn how to be like, and that does not matter, and keep moving on, because it's so prevalent now. That is wild that study said that. And then I also wanted to say this to a previous point about loneliness and like, why aren't people being there for me, or why aren't they meeting my need? And something that I have really had to ask myself is, if I don't feel like people are showing up for me, why do I feel it's their responsibility to reach out first? Why is there weight or gravity put in the fact that I'm the one going, hey, how are you? Do you want to, go to dinner or whatever? And like evaluating based off the interactions and how I'm received if I do reach out, versus just the fact that they did or didn't reach out. Because the truth is, the quality of the conversation really is not determined on who reaches out, because some people do reach out and it's not a good quality interaction. And so why am I evaluating the quality of these relationships based off who reaches out first? And it is my responsibility to reach out at least as much. But I can really victimize myself by being like, well, but they never call or text or blah, blah, blah. And I just think that's irrelevant.
Well, yeah, you're a very emotionally intelligent person, Melissa. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I think what you're getting at is the very basic fundamental business model of these tech companies, which is really to just keep your attention for as long as possible.
Yep.
And that's how they get their bonuses, they get their pay increases. That's how, we are the product. Like
Yep.
essentially, the angrier they make us become, the more money they're making. So there's a Chinese proverb which is, he or she who angers me controls me.
Mm-hmm.
And they are controlling us, and they're doing it by making us angry. What I always tell people is, every time you're on your phone, imagine, or on your laptop or tablet, it it's you versus the thousands of programmers behind the screen, their job is to grab you short and keep you long. And while they're doing that, what's happening to your life? You're missing it. It's interesting. This whole big thing that's come up the last 5 years about FOMO, fear of missing out.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's not what I read about and screened in, is that it's not fear of missing out. It's not FOMO. It's AMO, actually missing out. You're actually missing out on real life the more time we're on our screens.
Yeah.
And to what you said, I really like that about kind of who reaches out first. Well, sure, it would be wonderful to have friends who are always taking the initiative to reach out, but of course they don't often do that. As soon as we start thinking a lot about that, we start to ruminate on it, over focus on it, and then again we're in the victim position. Like, why aren't they initiating? And why am I always initiating? I think what one thing I do look at, I have to say, is reciprocating.
Mm-hmm.
So if I call someone and they don't answer the phone, I leave a message. Are they going to call me back,
Right.
or are they going to, or are they going to send me what I call in screen in, um, are they going to send me what I call the CRD, the communication reciprocation downgrade, which is they're going to reciprocate, but instead of a phone call, they're going to reciprocate with a text. So it's kind of like, okay, I want to talk with you. I'm leaving you a message for a minute. I'm thinking about you, and you're going to send me back like 8 words in a text that took you 10 seconds to write. And that's it's kind of, and the irony of this is that there's all this research that's found that the human voice is what carries connection. So if
Mm.
you literally, even by talking with someone on the phone, it can come close to a real in-person interaction. But as soon as you go to electronic communication, you lose all of that. In
Yeah.
fact, there's one of my favorite studies was done at University of Wisconsin, and Leslie Seltzer and her research team. What they did was they they got these middle school girls, and they had them work out math problems in front of strangers. So of course, that's going to really stress out these girls,
Right.
right? And so what they wanted to do was to get their cortisol levels high from the stress. And then they wanted and then they had their mothers either, uh, either, either pick them up in person or call them on the phone afterwards, or they had the girls, another group watch a movie. And they looked at their cortisol levels and as well as their oxytocin levels. So the cortisol is the stress hormone. The oxytocin is the neuropeptide that's associated with bonding and feeling
Mhm.
connected with it. And so they wanted to see, well, okay, so if mother shows up, what's the effect? And sure enough, the cortisol goes down, oxytocin goes up, right? So less stress, more connection. Phone call, almost exactly the same. Cortisol down, oxytocin up. Watching a movie, no change, right? So they're still just as stressed as before. They're still feeling just as little connection as they did before. And so this happened, I think it was 2011. A year later, they got this really brilliant idea. They said, well, let's add in another modality, another way that that the mothers can connect with their daughters after working out these math problems in front of strangers. Let's have the mothers send an electronic message. And they had these kind of like chat boards, and so they said, let's have them send this electronic message, and let's see what happens to the cortisol, which they were which they were measuring through the saliva, and with the oxytocin, which they're measuring through the urine of these girls. And so this is the chilling part. Again, they had the mother picks the girls up in person, mother calls on the phone, girls watch a movie, other group of girls watch a movie, and then another group of mothers sends an electronic message. So again, the mother coming in person or on the phone, the salivary cortisol goes down, so the girls become less stressed almost immediately. Then the urinary oxytocin, the bonding neurochemical, goes up. Okay, so again, they feel connected with their mothers. They're just in much better place. Again, the movie, no change in either. Now here's the chilling part. When the mothers send the electronic message, it's the same as when they're watching the movie. Exactly. There's no decrease.
No.
There's no increase in the
Wow,
oxytocin.
I feel like a giant asshole then, because 'cause I'm the texting friend, and I will bitch about my friends who refuse to text and only do phone calls. Oh my god, I just feel terrible.
Well, no, I mean, but I mean, so that's the thing. It's
Yeah.
we all, most people go through life, but any one of your listeners, you can choose to grow through life. And
Yeah.
just by listening to your podcast, just what you're doing here, Melissa, like you're curious, you're growing, you're learning. And that's why I'm also starting a podcast, because I think it's a great way. You find people that you that you find interesting, have a conversation with them, and learn and grow. That's what life's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not gonna beat myself
I'm
up
learning
too
from you
much,
here
but I
too,
am
right?
gonna call my friend. That is chilling because
Yeah, I mean,
we do
even
think we're
having
supplementing
a
just fine, and we're not.
you see, okay, in economics, there's this phenomenon which is called short-termism. Short-termism is when we focus on the short term and we neglect the long term. And so this is what a lot of companies do. Let's just focus on profits, right? Short term, okay, the economy's not doing so well, layoffs, right? Like short term. Well, the companies and you saw this even in the 2007 2008 economic downturn recession, companies that didn't lay off people but instead say let's take furloughs, let's all like take a month off, let's keep everybody here, those companies ended up doing much better in the long term than those that laid people off. Most of those companies, you look at companies that invest in sustainability, in research and development and so forth, again, long-term gains at the price of short-term profits sometimes. Well, that's what we do psychologically when we text, because we're basically saying, okay, I don't want the messiness of relationships. I want to control the communication. So I'm just going to blurt out this message and send it to them.
So
Also, I don't want to be
true.
interrupted. I want to be efficient, and so I'm just going to text. And what we ignore is the long-term consequences, and which are again loneliness, depression, anxiety, mental health issues, because we as human beings, we need each other. I learned this. So I was in the Peace Corps in Kenya in a
Wow.
previous life, right? But yeah, 1990 to 92, I was a teacher in rural Kenya, and then I went out and did these community development extension projects, and that was where I learned more about leadership than anything, even in my PhD, anything since then. It was really, because leadership's all about relationships. It's
Yep.
really relationship development toward shared goals. And and I learned because the only way you can get anything done in Africa is by knowing people, by getting along with them, connecting with them, listening to them. And so I learned, like, okay, well, if I want to get any projects done, and it wasn't even like that sort of transactional instrumental, okay, let me do this so I can get something done. It was like I just learned to really love people there and connect with people, and then all sorts of things got done. And this was really that was kind of a coming of age for me. But I think what happens, even like a lot of people, for example, they say, I had this conversation today because I'm working on a study with some professors in Connecticut, and this study's about where we've surveyed all these people, asking them about, okay, do they prefer working from home, do they prefer working from the office, and so forth, and then what are the effects, and with very little deviation from this, most people, but not all people, really often prefer working from home because, well, they can save money, they don't have to commute, they can rent or buy a cheaper place further from the city center. The reasons go on and on, right? And one of the reasons they also prefer to work from home is that it's like they're anxious about, especially after COVID, about going into the office and, okay, what's it going to be like? These relationships are
Yeah.
messy and so forth. And what they neglect, though, is the same thing that they're sharing with us, is that they become really lonely. They become really isolated. They
Yeah.
don't feel they're getting the mentoring they want in their company or organization. And again, it's this short termism. It's like we're focused on immediate benefits and not thinking about our holistic long term development. And that's what I think we got to shift toward, because otherwise we're really not going in a good direction.
Man, you are so right. And I'm like, my wheels are just turning. This study is like hearing that about the voice. Like, it really does make sense to me though, because I'm thinking about, well, first of all, I've been working from home since about May of 2024. And I'm now at the place where I'm like, because I became an entrepreneur, right? But now I'm like, damn, I kind of can't wait until my income is high enough to go like get a co-working space or something, because I want to leave my house more and I want to be around people more. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm lucky because I get to have conversations like this, so that part is like amazing. But it's like the only outside of my family, it's kind of the only interaction I have. And I want more. I want this and more because I am a very social creature. And I think most of us are more social than we realize, but we have all that negativity bias built in to keep ourselves safe. And so we think we need more solitude than we really do. And I do need lots of quiet time too. I am that person as well. But I'm thinking about my 23-year-old and just the difference between, because that generation, they're really lonely, They left high
Mhm.
school having experienced COVID, and um their social landscape looks very different than mine did in high school and the years following. And I'm picturing the way he lights up when he's on the phone with his friend versus
Mhm.
some quick little text, and he hates texting. He also hates answering the phone. So I don't know. I'm like, I'm gonna talk to him because I hate answering the phone too. So I'm like, okay, Melissa, you just gotta work on, maintaining your safety and your regulation when the phone rings. But it's almost like a trauma response for me where there's something unknown at the end of that line. Because it's become so foreign to receive a phone call. So I don't know what to do with it emotionally. So, like, I'm going to freaking work through that because I need to start answering my phone.
Well, I think what your son is experiencing is similar to what a lot of young people and older people are experiencing today, where, it's easy to kind of withdraw and control, but it's a false control.
Mhm.
And, I think whether we want to talk about creativity, success, happiness, all of them require two acts. The first act is with the door closed, the second with the door open. And the reason you're doing your podcast, similar to the reason that I'm here as your guest, and I'm also launching a podcast because I also feel similarly that I spend a lot of time. I mean, I teach in Rome, and I go into Rome a few days a week, and I work from home a few days a week. But I don't have the kind of conversation you and I are having every moment, every day at all, Melissa. Like, this
Oh,
is really
really?
deep, what we're talking about. Yeah, because the thing about being a researcher is that you get into, like, my research is on social connection, on relationships, and leadership. And the more you go into that, you start to realize, well, you really need to talk to people who really cared profoundly about relationships and are willing to talk about them. And that's you. That's other people that invite me onto their podcast. I'll even say, though, you're really special. You got a really deep and profound kind of purview on relationships that I appreciate. And
Thank you.
doing this for me is really meaningful. And when I have some times where I'm teaching my students where we really, it really get into it, and that's really rewarding. But a lot of times, I'm there at the university. I'm interacting with other professors who are researching finance or marketing or things that I'm interested in, but not on this
Yeah.
level. And so yeah, it's really rewarding. And then I think, when we get to where I'm offer 2 free books to your listeners. One of them is called The Myth of Friendship. One of the core principles in the myth of friendship is that w- we each of us, we need to find a balance between togetherness and separateness.
Mhm.
So the part of your son who wants to do his own thing sometimes and not go and get on a 1 hour phone call, or the part of you that wants to text and do that, there's part of that can be positive, because sometimes you just say, oh, you know what, I just want to, there's some things I want to think about. I want to reflect on my life. The only thing is, it's much better to do those things without texting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the number of times that we touch our phones per day is now 2,500 is the
Oh,
average. And
gross.
if you want to get to any kind of deeper level of thinking about anything in your life you want to change, if you want to not just go through life but grow through life, it's imperative to be able to really take some time away from the mix and just think. So turning notifications off, not not checking your phone, 20 times each hour, and just taking some time to think. And then when we do that, what I found is that then we go back into society, back into relationships in a much more meaningful way. And
Mm-hmm.
we go there with something, instead of going there with need for others to fill a gap in our lives, we go there with want to learn from others and to share with others. And then we see our relationships transform dramatically.
God, I love it. Well, this has been wonderful for me. Thank you for such kind, sweet things to say about the show. I really appreciate that. Tell us the things where we can find you, again, what the books that you're offering are, all that stuff.
Okay, sure. Well, thanks, Melissa. So my book, Love and Suffering, Break the Emotional Chains That Prevent You from Experiencing Love. I would be humbled if your listeners, if you purchased it, 100% of the proceeds go to nonprofit education programs in Africa and Latin America.
Oh, I love
You
that.
can check it on Amazon. It's got 5-star reviews right now. And, uh, and yeah, I hope you enjoy it. I got a lot of really good feedback about it, and I'm sure you'd find it useful. Uh, if buying a book is not top of mind for you right now, I'm speaking to your listeners here. Don't worry. I mean, I know the times are not easy right now. Then I'd like to offer you 2 free books. The first is called The Myth of Happiness: How Your Definition of Happiness Creates Your Unhappiness. And the second
Mm.
book is called The Myth of Friendship: How Your Misunderstandings about friendship keep you lonely. The Myth of Friendship: How Your Misunderstandings about Friendship Keep You Lonely. So here's how you can download the 2 books. Okay, you go to theartoflivingfree.org/free happiness and friendship books. So once again, theartoflivingfree.org/free happiness and friendship books. When you go there, you put in your email, you're going to get a confirmation email in your inbox. You confirm it, and then you get the download links, and you can either print them out or you can read them on any e-reader as you prefer.
Awesome. Well, and I'll make sure that I include any of those links in the show notes too. But I have really loved this. You are welcome back anytime. I love conversations like this. And it's really important information, I think.
Well, I'd love to come back. You're a great host, and you got me thinking about a lot of things I hadn't thought of in a while. So
Well,
I learned a
good.
lot from you. Thanks, Melissa.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming to Emotionally Unavailable. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, and share. Emotionally Unavailable. All right, that's it from me. So make sure that you check out the show notes for links. And until next time, let's all just keep swimming.
INDEPE and cut.